Welcome to the Yoga Bellies and Babies podcast. I'm Krishna, I'm your host, and I'm so thrilled to be here with you. When you become a mother, so much changes, including your relationship with movement and your body. And today's conversation explores exactly that transformation. I'm joined by Sarah Ezrin, a yoga teacher and mother of two, who openly shares how pregnancy and birth completely revolutionized her approach to yoga. Sarah takes us from her days of intense 2-hour practices to discovering the power of what she calls yoga snacks, tiny movements of practice that fit into the chaotic reality of motherhood. We discuss nervous system regulation, finding community as new mothers, how to adapt your practice when a full hour of yoga simply isn't possible anymore. Sarah also shares her powerful journey through her difficult first birth and how her empowering second birth experience helped her heal. Whether you're pregnant, postpartum, or really deep in the trenches of parenting, this conversation offers practical and real wisdom to help you reconnect with your body and find peace in small moments throughout the day. And before we dive in, if you're enjoying listening to this episode or any other episodes of the Yoga Bellies and Babies podcast, I would really appreciate if you take a moment to like, subscribe, or review this episode wherever you watch or listen to it. Your support helps more mothers find this type of content and allows me to keep bringing guests and keep doing this work to bring these important conversations to you and to other parents out there. Every single review makes a difference. Thank you. Now, let's dive into the conversation with Sarah Ezrin. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Krishna. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so glad to be here. I was just telling you before we hit record that it's so nice to be able to connect eyeball to eyeball with other moms because we support each other at a distance or, we follow each other, and like to be able to actually sit down and learn from each other is such a gift. So I'm excited to get to chat with you today and learn from you.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of the online world, isn't it? We talk about finding our village and connecting with other moms, and it's so nice. And I've been following you. I discovered you through a podcast on parenting about your yoga and parenting book. And then I started following you on Instagram, and I just loved how real and authentic you were. And I remember one of the first reels I saw was about the summer holiday, and everyone was doing this trend with their children from home and then jumping to their holiday destination. And that summer holiday, we also were just at home and moving houses. And then I was like, oh, I wonder where she's going. And she jumped from one side of the house to the other side of the house. And I thought that's just so refreshing to see that it's normal not to go on a big fancy vacation with your kids. And that's okay. Yeah, absolutely. So
we're about to do it again next week. We have spring break coming up next week, and everyone's like, I'm going to Hawaii and I'm going here. And I'm like, I don't know how you guys can do this. And you have 4, like you're never going anywhere ever again. You're just going to have to be on a train the rest of your life. At least you have the train option in Europe.
That's true. We
don't have that in the same way in the States.
And we only travel if we have grandparents with us.
Oh my gosh.
Otherwise,
it's too many cats to be herding at once.
No. Either we travel with grandparents or we travel grandparents. It's one or the other. Absolutely. It's a game changer, isn't it? I would love to start with yoga. And I'd like to know, I know your background is yoga teaching, and then from there you do a lot of other stuff. But if we could start with you and your practice pre-pregnancy and pregnancy. So I'd like to know a little bit about how you used to practice before and how that shifted during pregnancy.
Yeah, that's a great question. My relationship with yoga has been a long one. It's probably one of the longest relationships I've had next to my family members, right? I mean, I've got some girlfriends that I've known a little bit longer, but other than that, it's been me and my yoga mat. Prior to having kids, so I actually started a long time before I had children. I had my first son when I was 37, but I started to do yoga in 2001. So I was 19 at the time. I just turned 19. But for most of my yoga career, when I first discovered it, I was in awe of how embodied I could be. And it's really what made me fall in love with the practice, because I had been doing so many things to be disconnected from myself. I was, abusing drugs and over drinking. It was the early years of college, and also teetering on the brink of an eating disorder, which then became a full-blown one. So moving with my breath and moving in this very intentional way was like, it really felt like it was one of the first times I was in my body. Unfortunately, Unfortunately, the way that yoga was introduced to the West is as this form of exercise and fitness. And it's this, what I now know, having studied the wisdom texts, is like the tiniest hair of what yoga is, but it was the most sellable. And, that was the thing that could be on magazine covers. You can't really put someone meditating on a magazine cover. I mean, now maybe we're a little more accepting of rest and introspection, but in these days, this was like, early 2000s, late 90s, it really was like the very skinny white women doing these really elaborate postures. And so I got kind of swept up into that tide of the physical. And even though it was the physical that brought me in, but it was really like that, the deeper connections to all those other layers, I started to emphasize the physical. And so I started to do Ashtanga yoga, which is like a 2 hour a day, 6 day a week, hardcore practice. Like you don't even drink a sip of water while you're practicing. And it's a beautiful meditation practice. And I want to make sure I'm being very clear, like there absolutely are many layers to all of it, but the body of it all became a driving force for me. It was the postures and it really was. It was like getting to the next pose, even just competing in the teacher culture of Los Angeles at the time, where you had to be thin and flexible and do these things that were, quote unquote acrobatic. Even though I always kind of talked against that grain too, I always really did stand up for it. I see now in retrospect, I was also still perpetuating it too. I would be like, no, you don't need to handstand. And then I'd like go and like do a handstand without being warm. And it's like, well, I don't know what messaging. And I was doing it for the purpose of inspiration. But so it was really body based for a long, long time. And not surprisingly, I was also deep into my eating disorder. So everything was very body centric for me because as many people know, when you study eating disorders and that kind of body-based exercise obsession, is that it really is just a control mechanism. So when I got pregnant for the first time, my practice had already started to change because as I'd gotten older, I was having more injuries. I met my husband. Like I couldn't build everything around my yoga practice in the same way. It started to become much more a part of my life as opposed to my life. Right. Like everything was about my practice when I was in my 20s. And then when I met my husband, I was like, okay, I could skip a day. And, I didn't need to do Ashtanga yoga. I had to stop doing it because of injuries. There was an expansion, but it was still really about the body. And I had a pretty uneventful pregnancy. I mean,
Okay.
the usual
That's good.
exhaustion. And yes, for my first one. My
I guess.
second was HG, but
Okay.
but for the first one, before I got pregnant with my first son, we had a miscarriage. It was a missed miscarriage where my body continued to produce pregnancy hormones even though the baby had stopped growing at 5 weeks. By 9 weeks, my body was still acting as though,
Pregnant.
and I didn't know until we went in for the scan that actually a yolk hadn't even formed. So for 4 weeks, I had been living with this inside of me, and I felt really betrayed. I had spent my whole life like trying to control the body. I was like, well, the body's the one thing, like can't control against death. I lost my brother and my mom and so many family members and, people that were close to me. You can't control against the changes in the world. You can't control against changes in your relationships. But I'm like, but my body I could control. And that first in a motherhood was like, no, you can't. Like, just kidding. So I did try to control my body as we got pregnant intentionally again with my son. And it ended up being a fairly healthy pregnancy. So what I did is
How did you try to
I
control
went
your
into,
body?
yeah, I mean, I treated my body as though it were pregnant. With the first pregnancy, we had pulled the goalie, if you will, but we weren't really changing our lifestyle. So I was still drinking alcohol. I was still over teaching and running around like crazy. And I was really into like Soul Cycle, which was this very intense cycling and like just
Yeah.
really intense stuff, right? Like it
Yeah.
was just
Yeah.
like intense, intense. So after the miscarriage, I started to go to acupuncture at a fertility acupuncturist. One of their recommendations was to continue to treat my body as though it were pregnant. So to create this fertile ground. And part of creating the fertile ground meant not doing those intense exercise classes. Obviously, the acupuncture sessions, which were this rare time where I was stopping moving and allowing my body to be held and settling in. It was dietary. I had abstained from alcohol and other substances, even my dietary changes. I just was eating a lot more consciously and nutritiously. When I'm like, prior to starting to get pregnant, I was a yoga teacher in San Francisco. I'm like eating on the bus and like, running
On
around
the
and like
go
literally
and
like you're eating while you're walking. Yeah, it's
yeah.
always on the go. So it just got me to slow down. And I needed that. I mean, the body was the gateway to start to access this place, but I still didn't really change a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. It was like a
It was
forced, it
like,
sounds like it was like a forced, very conscious, forced change to prepare
yes,
yourself for pregnancy, like for a
yes,
specific goal, not for like
yes,
a overall well-being, just like I don't want to
exactly.
have another
It was
miscarriage. Like, let's
exactly,
do what we can.
exactly. It wasn't for me. It was
Mm.
for the goal of having the baby and, the intense, like, so physically it was fairly uneventful. I do think now in retrospect, because I had hyperemesis with my second, which is nausea and vomiting throughout the whole pregnancy. And it was really brutal with my
Oh,
second, that maybe there was a little bit of that with my first, but the anxiety was really intense with my first. I
with
mean,
the
it was like
pregnancy
debilitating, absolutely, because of the loss.
because of the first loss.
Um, yeah, but I didn't really change much as far as like my physical practice was still pretty strong. I did stop doing the intense exercising and I was eating a little more nutritiously. And I was going to acupuncture and, your first one, right? Where you don't have any other kids. I was like doing
You have
chiropractic
time, go for
and
the massage and
acupuncture.
go for that.
Yes, it was like having multiple prenatal massages. I did 3 maternity shoots. Like that tells you something.
Oh,
My second,
wow.
there's like no pictures. But when the birth came around, was like, talk about being thrown through the threshold of motherhood and this realization of like what you have control over, which is very little, being literally ripped from stem to stern. It was days long prodromal labor. I was turned away from the hospital multiple times. I had
Mhm.
multiple interventions, everything except we managed to not get a cesarean. But I did, had an episiotomy and forceps and vacuum and like literally like one after the other and Pitocin. Like I thought I was going to have, unmedicated birth and
Because you were a yoga teacher,
um,
right?
yeah, exactly. It would be so easy.
I know.
You just fall right out of me. And like, I know now, again, 5.5 years later, like I was so tightly gripped to the expectation of it all, right? Like it was like just like I was tightly gripped to needing to be pregnant and the pregnancy needing to go as it should because that's what you do. That was such a great point of yours. Like my getting healthy wasn't to take care of my vessel, it was to get to have the perfect pregnancy. And then I had this idea of what the perfect birth would be, and I was fixated on that. And of course, it went completely sideways. And because of that, weeks before I was telling everybody, oh, I'll see you in 6 weeks. I was expecting to be back and teaching with him in a sling or something. But no, my body was completely wrecked and the physical postures were no longer safe for me. I no longer felt held when I was on my mat and trying to move. I mean, it took me a long time to get any kind of movement, first of all. They cleared me for yoga, by the way, in the United States. This is like how wild it is at 2 weeks
Two
postpartum.
weeks.
Yes. My OB was like,
2 weeks.
yeah. And
Wow.
thank goodness I didn't listen. Thank goodness. Because if I'd had a smoother birth, I think, I would have been out there and I
You would
would
have
have been
ripped.
moving. It's wild.
That's
Um,
insane. At two
but I,
weeks, it
at
would,
2 weeks.
yeah, over here in
Yeah.
the
Oh, no.
Netherlands, at 2 weeks, it was like, okay, now you can go for a walk around the block
Yeah.
if you want. It's okay.
No, you're meant to be like in a cave-like shape. We have a dish. If you carried your baby, you have a
Mm.
dining dish size wound in your uterus from where the placenta was attached. That takes a long time to heal. Things are coming back together. Intense exercise is not, it's like you need to be working on breathing and connection and just like coming back into your body, bringing the belly back together because the separation and This is why I think a lot of us end up doing longer term damage to ourselves because we rush right back into intense movement without having like just the basic integration of our breath and our spine alignment back, right? Like we're coming in from pregnancy where your bum's kind of sticking out. You're in a really big arched position to carry the belly, and then carrying the baby is like the opposite position where you're more rounded. So there's a lot of pieces to it, but I'm grateful for my intuitive self and my wisdom self because I was like, I'm not doing yoga. I was so wrecked and so tired and so alone. And my husband and I didn't have grandparents that lived super close. So even when people would come and visit, they would be guests in our home. And then I would put pressure on myself to treat them like guests. Like now I'm like, demanding, like, you get me
You're here
this,
to
like
help.
yelling at everybody. But that first baby, it was just so hard. Postpartum was really challenging. And then, of course, the world shut down 12 weeks after having my son. So, any access we had to mommy and me groups or support bringing in a nanny if we were going to bring someone in, like doulas, any of that stuff, we lost any support. So, I was like really on this island alone in our
Yeah.
apartment. And my yoga practice was not my safe place in the same way. So I
Yeah,
knew
because your
things had to
yoga
change.
practice looked like something completely different, I can
Yeah.
imagine,
Yeah.
from
What
what
I
you're
thought
describing it.
my physical yoga practice as it
Exactly.
was actually more harmful. But what was born out of it was a completely different perspective and appreciation of yoga. But it took time.
How did you handle that then? Because I'm just wondering, how hard was it to accept that your yoga practice had to change and that this thing that
Yeah.
you've been doing for so many years now has to look completely different because it doesn't go with where you are right now?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of grief, for many reasons. And I was a little more fascinated by aerobic movement because, of course, I have the eating disorder history. I fall for what we're all told, which is like the get your body back. So even though the slow or even faster yoga wasn't feeling necessarily safe, I was trying to do jumping jacks and trying to do squats and then peeing myself. I was incontinent. So there was like a shame component to it as well. And I remember saying to my husband, like, how could I even, if I went back to teaching, I couldn't have walked around the room and done something and then like been leaking in front of everybody. So there was a shame component, a grief component to it. I will say the thing that I loved doing that was the healthiest was putting my son in a pack and walking all around the city
By
because it
pack, you
is
mean
such a
a
walkable
carrier.
city. Yeah, like
Okay.
a
Yeah,
front
front
body
carrier. Yeah.
carrier. Yeah. And where we were was, in these beautiful hills up by the Presidio in San Francisco. And so there was all these different trails to walk around and see the bridges. And so that became a very healing form of movement for me. And yeah, it just took a long time. I didn't go back to teaching. Everything was online by that point, but I didn't go back to teaching until he was about 8 months old,
Okay.
which was a
Yeah.
very different vision. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
see you in 8 weeks. And it took me 8 months to finally get back to teaching and then, really revisiting what asana, the physical poses, look like for me.
And it's ironic that you say that the most helpful thing for you was, just going for a walk with your baby.
Mm,
Because, and you said we have this thing of getting our body back. And especially if you've had an eating disorder, if you've had some sort of trauma or anxiety, there's this pressure, right? And it's not so much about getting your body back, but it's about doing what you were used to do before. And that's where the
yeah,
question was coming. We kind of understand that the body shape is going to change and it's going to take time, but it's how much time do I need to go back to that spin class, or how much time do I need to go back to that aerobic class, right? And we have this
yeah,
fixation that we're going to go back to the same activities that we were doing before. And that's why I loved your approach about those. You talk a lot about the mini yoga practices, or like you call them
yoga
micro
snacks.
yoga snacks. Yeah, and the yoga snacks. I wanted to know a little bit more about how, any advice, because a lot of people who listen to this are pregnant or postnatal, and we have this idea, right? We go to a 60-minute yoga class pre-pregnancy,
Yeah,
in pregnancy, and then we have postnatal yoga classes that are 1 hour. But
yeah,
it's very rare to be able to do that at home. And
yeah,
sometimes we feel like, oh, well, if I don't have an hour, I'm not even going to bother. Or I can't get to class. If I'm 15 minutes late, I'm not even going to bother because I missed half the class or whatever. So how do we, what advice do you have to moms who, even from newborns who don't have that 1 hour in the morning anymore? Because let's face it, an hour is a lot for a lot of
Oh,
people.
yeah. No, it's
Um, and
impossible. Yeah.
and from a mindset point of view, not so much the practical stuff, which we get into later, but how to accept the fact that that is no longer your reality and that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Why is it so hard to accept that?
Well, there's so many reasons. I mean, like I was just reading something right now about how thinness is really a perpetuation of white supremacy and the patriarchy because like having a very thin wife in the industrial revolution after we moved from working on farms and working as like everybody was kind of more egalitarian as far as the roles in the home, that when they wanted men in the factories and it became a very male centric world, having a demure wife that was rail thin, who was submissive, was really a sign of wealth, right? To have that, giving the man the freedom to be able to be out there. So this stuff is deep, right? Like this is
That's
like
coming
deep.
back, isn't it?
I mean, but it's just so
Yeah.
deep. The conditioning is deep. There's so many things and so many layers to it about beauty standards and body shape and all those things. And we can, if we try to follow every single trend, and it's just hard. It's just really hard to be a woman in this world because a lot of the beauty standards are impossible and they
Yeah.
are meant to distract us. Because if we were, and some of them are so fun, like you can see my nails. I love having long nails. I'm not knocking anything. Like you do what feels good for you. And beauty was this expression, right? Like when makeup first started in Egyptian times, and it would be anybody of any gender wearing it. But I think that there is also this kind of like submersive, like it's not like there's one man that's like planning all of this, but I do think there's something about distracting women who are so intuitive and so powerful, and particularly mothers, as we step into the mother role and into the crone role, where we really should be using our energy to commune together and to focus on nurturing our babies and to learn how to ride our cycles. But a lot of us are going against our natural cycles and we're trying to change the aging clock and we're distracting ourselves with, this and that and the other. And again, like I am guilty.
Yeah.
I have my distractions, but there's so many layers to it,
Yeah.
right? So it's like you have this like insidious, just like that's just life, right? That's like it doesn't matter what country you're in, like this is just happening. Women, like, this is happening. There's just pressure on women no matter where you are. But then you add in like also it depends what country you're in, obviously, but like then there's the pressure of success and what that looks like and being able to perform and what does it look like to be abundant, and this lie that we're told that like that we really do live in a scarcity world where you have to fight for resources, when again women in particular know, like step outside into nature, it is a very abundant world out there. And we're being fed like through advertising. There's just so many layers to it. Okay. So I will
Yeah.
get off
Yeah.
that soapbox real quick.
No,
Let's go
no.
back to motherhood. But I think it's important to know, like, just to like lift the veil a little bit, right? Like, it's like, and I'm just going to be totally honest right now. Like, I played with getting filler for the first time, and I'm going to do it again. I am going to do it again.
That's
But I
fine.
also was like, as they're stabbing me, I'm like, fuck, excuse me. I'm like,
You're like, what am I doing?
bleep,
What should I do? Yeah.
bleep the patriarchy. Like I literally was like, and I was getting so angry about it, but I'm also like doing it and like, happy with the results. But it's just like, I think we just need to go into it with eyes wide open, that there's a lot of like pressures and factors. So then you add in, like, then you have a baby and what's meant to be this beautiful cocoon time. Like, we look at how the fourth trimester is treated in certain cultures, like in Mexico, it's called La Cuarentena.
Mm.
And like the women are surrounded by other women and your body is nursed and you're given that space to bring your baby back to health. You're not out jogging at 2 weeks. Like you are eating nourishing food, and your aunties and your sister and your mom. And this is many cultures, right? But for some reason, as we've been more westernized, where it's this expectation of like you go to a postnatal class and you're like trying to lose the baby fat.
Yeah, that's the pressure. Let's
Uh,
do core.
yeah,
And
exactly.
thinking, why am I doing core? And, we're both in that world and we teach the yoga, and I'm sure you don't teach it that way, and neither haven't been trained to teach it that way, but I had to do the training, learn that this is not the way to recover from the insides, because that's what we were trying to do.
And it doesn't sell. It doesn't sell
No.
in the same way. Come and breathe for an hour with your babies is boring to those of us that have been, we're addicted to how fast moving things are, and we're so used to instant gratification. Look at what we have. We have the world in our hand with our phones, and you tell people to come into a room and just lay on the floor and
just
breathe.
be there.
But now, I don't know, I'd like to ask you, like, you have 4 kids now. I'm so curious about your own practice journey, but like, wouldn't you like pay good money to have an hour to go to a room and just lie there and breathe?
I
feel
paid good
like that's
money
all I
to
want to
go
do.
for a yoga nidra weekend. A few months ago, I follow a yoga nidra teacher. She came to Amsterdam, and I thought there was 2 full days, and I would have never done that before, ever. I would have done one yoga nidra session, okay, but a full weekend, I think it was 6 hours on Saturday and 6 hours on Sunday, just yoga nidra after each other. And as a yoga teacher, I had this urge to take my notebook and my notes, right? It wasn't a course, but you could take attention. And I did have that urge to learn, right? But from a teacher point of view. And then halfway in, I'm like, no, I'm here as a mother. I'm here as a person. I don't want to be here as a student for once. I don't need to be making something productive out of this, because we have that constant urge, right? Even if you're doing something nice for yourself, try and find something productive out of it. And then I was like, no, like, fuck the notes. I can just listen and take it in right now as a mother and not as a professional. But it took a bit of conscious effort, and there was guilt involved because I left one of my babies at home with fever that night. He's in good hands with his father, but there was the guilt. There was that, I'm taking a whole weekend away to just lie on the floor. What are we talking about? What a waste of time. I swear, it was just the most amazing thing. And yeah, but my yoga practice doesn't look like that anymore. I don't have a yoga practice that's more than 20 minutes, to be honest. I have tried different things. I've tried to get up before the children. That's way too early for me. They get up at 6. I don't want to be up before 6. I much rather lie in bed as long as I can lie in bed. And then I get up when they get up. And then I'll do maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes of a yoga practice before going to bed. Not every day. I'll do different things. And now, but during their nap time, when I had 1 child or 2 children, their nap time would be like, okay, let me do something physical. And now when the babies nap, I do a yoga nidra or I nap. Yeah. And that's it. And I haven't lost the weight, put it that way. I look pregnant, and it's been 17 months. But that's what it is. I do pelvic floor. I've gone to the pelvic floor specialist, which I never did. Because as a yoga teacher, I did all the, and I actually went 2 months ago to the pelvic floor. And now I do pelvic floor exercises as my yoga practice. And that's it. You could do 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So that's why I love about your yoga snacks, because it just shifts, doesn't it? After having a baby, one concept of time is just completely different. And you might find the moments, but you don't necessarily have the energy sometimes, even if you have that window of time. So actually, I wanted to ask you, we're on the topic now. You asked me about my own yoga practice. I know you talk a lot about nervous system and nervous system regulation, and I did something over the weekend, and I thought I'd tell you about it and see if you could analyze it for me, because I'm sure it's definitely related to the nervous system. So I went away for the first time in 2 years. I actually went away for 4 days, and it was this trip with 2 girlfriends for my 40th birthday. Thank you. We went to Italy. And this trip has been planned since January, right? So almost 3 months. And I hadn't been able to focus on it or prepare myself until the day of the flight. So that same morning, I finished teaching in the morning. I'm like, okay, where am I going? What time? I knew my flight was in the evening. What airport am I flying to? I need to pack. What should I pack? What's the weather like? What are we doing? I already told my friends I don't have the mental space to plan anything. You guys arrange. And let me know, we're in Europe. It's okay. A few people had asked me, are you excited about your trip? And, people around me were getting excited for me. And I didn't have the capacity, the mental capacity to actually prepare for anything, even mentally, until a few hours before. And then when we arrived, it took me about 24 hours to kind of be there. I was in Italy. physically, but mentally I wasn't there. It took me a good 24 hours to be there with my friends and then actually go.
Yep.
So could you talk a little bit about why that happens to us and why is it so hard for us to kind of get there to those places and when we're actually there, because I definitely notice there's a difference from, just going out for a 1 hour break or going out for coffee with your friend to actually going away. It took 24 hours for me to settle.
Yeah. I mean, how cool though that you had the awareness the whole time, right? Like, to me, that is the practice right there. And that's just one of the things. I know I went on my soapbox about the patriarchy, but I just want to say, like, the
Yes.
thing that was like the most eye-opening for me when I did start coming back to my mat was that I realized that the practice was not the poses. I remembered the teachings of the scriptures and the teachings of the texts and the breath work and the simpler things and the awareness piece. The awareness piece was huge. And that was the realization of like, oh, anything I'm doing in relationship and connection is yoga.
Yeah.
So that also includes, and that's where I got this idea of like, oh, it wasn't my idea, but I was like, the realization of like, parenting is yoga, right?
Yeah.
Relationship with my husband is yoga. My relationship with the divine is yoga, but so is our relationship to ourselves.
Which we forget
So
about, don't we?
oh, especially as moms, right? That becomes the last thing on the totem pole when it really should be the first. It has to be the first for sustainability and for us to be able to, it's like you can't pour water into something if your well is empty, right? You
Yeah.
can't you
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
give if you have nothing to give.
Yeah.
So when we are in those chronic states of high regulation or upregulation, which is what it sounds like with you, where it's like you're going, and maybe there was a little bit of flight involved in that. Maybe there was a little bit of an avoidance too, but pat yourself on the back for being aware, for even noticing like, oh, I am just not even able to get grounded to focus on the trip right now. And then when you were able to get on the trip to notice, oh, my soul is not in my body right now. My body is here, but I am not here. Like the awareness of that is such a beautiful thing. But yes, like the nervous system needed to start to settle down to find that place of safety again. And for most of us with small children, even if it's good stress, we are running in these places of stress. There is such thing as good stress. There is absolutely good stress. And by the way, an upregulated state, which is anything that's like that fight or flight kind of response, is a very good thing. This is how we get out of bed in the morning. You need upregulation. I'm upregulated right now as I'm excitedly speaking with you. I'm upregulated when I see my kids after school and we go running towards each other. Similarly, you need to downregulate when it's time to start to slow things down, or you want to do a yoga nidra weekend and you're spending that time with your friends. Riding the nervous system and its waves in a reflexive way is the goal. But what happens is most of us get stuck in one frequency and we're just there no matter what's going on. And so it's almost like you couldn't hit the
Yeah.
brakes, right?
That becomes the norm.
Dr. Daniel Siegel compares more down regulation to the brakes and the upregulated state to the gas. And so a lot of us are just like pedal to the metal, foot on the gas, like we're going. And also like I'm on the first day of my cycle today. I'm just feeling overwhelmed in general. I was literally crying before we got on here for zero reason. I read a text. I was like, oh. But I feel like I can't remember why I'm walking into rooms. I feel like for me, my foot is slammed on the brake. I don't have any acceleration going on this week. Understandably, right? Like I'm on my cycle. This is a down regulated period. Just like postpartum is meant to be a down regulated period in our life. So really starting to ride the waves and not fight against them.
Yeah.
We're women with female anatomy and female hormones and female physiology trying to live in a world that is built for testosterone in a male structure. And so it's really starting to pay attention to those. I mean, who knows where you were in your cycle too, right? Like you could have been coming in from, and like, yeah, I mean, you don't have to share that part, but that's what it sounds like to me, like your foot was on the gas, right?
Yeah, it definitely was.
Yeah.
But I was surprised that it took me so long. And I do my practices, but I was
Of course.
surprised it took me, I thought once I get to the airport on the plane, that's it.
Yeah.
It took me 24 hours. And I was surprised
Yeah.
that it took me that long to actually
Yeah.
downregulate.
But at least you did downregulate, right? Have
Yeah,
you ever been on a
absolutely.
vacation where you
Yeah.
couldn't downregulate the whole time?
Yeah.
I've had those trips where it's like there's like a work deadline going on, or I've got a training coming up, and I'm like, oh, I was like not on that vacation at all.
Yeah.
I was going the whole time. So
Yeah.
how wonderful that you were aware and that you were able to kind of pump the brakes in a
Yeah.
way. The other thing that makes me think of, like keeping with this car metaphor, is you didn't get there and crash. It took you 24 hours to come down the other side of the mountain and then land on your feet and be present with your friends. So many people were running, and then you slam on the brakes and they're just like dead. They get super sick or they're really exhausted. In many ways, I think for you, that 24-hour curve was actually a really beautiful descent into the present moment
Yeah.
and into settling your nervous system in a healthy way.
Yeah. And no, totally. I came back into it slowly as well. I
Mm,
noticed it wasn't just like, oh, welcome home, boom. It was a slow
yeah.
one. And I did notice that, I saw some parents at school and some moms, they knew I was away. And there was this healthy jealousy. They were like, how was your trip? And I could see like so many of them, they just want to be able to do this as well.
Yeah.
And so my question is how, because we talk about survival mode and being on this, hitting the gas. Hitting the gas sounds very much like being on survival mode constantly. And
Mhm.
it's just etching away at our nervous system. But how to not, we can't go away every month for 4 days. Let's face it, we
Yeah.
have responsibilities and it's just not possible. You could maybe do it once a year, maybe, who knows. But what can mums do? What could we do on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, on a practical level now, so that we don't have to, actually physically move to another country for a weekend?
Yeah, and this is kind of where yoga snacks came about. So I had a really tough pregnancy with my second, as I alluded to earlier, hyperemesis and like multiple hospitalizations. I was laid out. Like talk about your body, because it was very different than the first pregnancy where I was still running around the city and teaching full time. Like I had my toddler who was crying for me and I couldn't get out of bed on certain days. It was so bad. And when I turned 40 for my birthday, I had asked my family to pool together and they sent me away for our baby moon, but I was by myself. So like my husband wasn't even invited or my kid. And I remember being on the trip and like it coming to the last day and I was like, I am more tired when I got here. Like, how is this even possible? How could 48 hours by myself with room service, with a prenatal massage, like, why isn't my tank filled? And it was then that it was like very, very eye-opening for me. And I was in the process of writing my book still. And I was like, oh my goodness, like I was rereading all of the interviews I'd done because that was a big piece of my book was interviewing other parents and being like, how are you doing this? It's not the weekend. It's not the 4 days away. It's not the 2-hour massage that's going to move the needle. It has to be a daily thing. And we have to be willing, again, to know that there will be days of low energy and there will be days of up energy, but it's tiny intentional choices that we make throughout the day.
Yeah.
There's a great book by Dr. Pooja Lakshman called Real Self-Care. And she talks a lot about this, that self-care is not the bubble baths. It's not the yoga class. It's the boundary setting and the unapologetic asking for our needs to be met. That's the practice. And the yoga, like, no, I wasn't doing downward dog, but I would do a little bit of breath work. I sit every day. Like now I'll sit for 20 minutes, but even 5 minutes makes a dent and makes a difference. And all these different practices that I do throughout the day, I mean, I joke, but it's very serious, which is like, I feel like everything I do all day long, my choices are like nervous system nurturing choices. And then I go and have like my coffee.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, and then I got to spend
No,
another
no, I
hour
know.
like
Yeah.
bringing it
Yeah.
back down. But like,
Yeah.
that's really what it is. It's just like this constant, it is a constant kind of checking in and it's all these little things. That's where the nourishment for moms has to come in. That's where the yoga snack comes from. And it's not stop dropping and like doing a bunch of down dogs in the middle of your meeting or in your carpool pickup. It's literally being like, "Oh my gosh, like I am in the car line for pickup and I am answering emails. My physical body is here." Or like, again, I'll just refer to this week being so low energy. I'm like, my body is like driving the car. I'm
Yeah.
like, this is not
Yeah.
safe. you know, but like you're exhausted. And so what do you do in a moment like that? Well, get out of the car and just like shake your body a little bit.
Yeah.
Right? Move around a little bit. Do a type of breath that is invigorating, which is always going to be something more on the inhalation. Like use the practices like a snack
Yeah.
to nourish ourselves for the entirety of the day instead of just imagining that we could eat a buffet once a week or for 3 days in a row and that that's going to sustain us. It has to be these tiny, tiny intentional
Tiny
changes
things.
and
Yeah.
practices.
You remind me of two things. First, I do yoga nidra and then also have a coffee. By the
Yes.
way, I'm putting my
It
hand
should
up
be the
here.
other way around, right?
Yeah. But also it reminds me of my therapist once told me, she was giving this beautiful analogy. She said, you know, we sometimes as moms, we feel like we're drowning, that sense of you're drowning in everything. And you kind of come up, pop up, get some air, go back down, come up, pop up, get some air, come back down. And we find these little things to help us come up and breathe. But really what we need to be doing is lowering the level of the water. It's not so much how often you pop up and take a breath, right? It's can you just reduce the level of the water so you're not drowning? And that's where I'm curious, because at first I thought like things like little yoga snacks are more like going up to pop up and breathe. But how can yoga help us lower the level of the water? Where's the difference in how we use our yoga
I mean,
practice?
I think the level of the water is more systems, right? I think that that's going to be more systemic. I think, you know, we need to find the things that create the lightness. It's, you know, learning how to float even as the waves are coming to attack you. Like we cannot control the water. I think that's the lesson of it, right? Like we're not going to be able to change many of the laws or the systems are in place or the support. I mean, you're in the Netherlands too, which is like, I'm fascinated by how much more supported moms are, but that every mom I talk to is still exhausted and
I mean,
overwhelmed. So
yeah.
it's like something, right? There's something going on. And I think those are the things that yeah, I mean, what I really picture when I think of the drowning, and I do think we're all drowning, is that what's going to hold us together is reaching our arms out and linking together and becoming one big raft for one another. That is how the water level, you know, I don't think we can control that in that way. We can make shifts and we can make changes and we can learn to swim with the tide, but we need to figure out how to float better. So we're not just sinking, and floating is going to come from, you know, lightness and surrender and choice and flow. And I really have this picture. I say this metaphor all the time of like, I'm drowning, but I like see another mom and like, you know, we wave to each other. Are we able to link arms for a minute? Because community is going to be one of those things that buoys us up and that makes us stronger than whatever the water is doing. We
Yeah.
are each other's lifeboats.
Yeah, and I mean that brings me on to the topic of community, because you know, you have your community, I'm building my community, and a lot of it's online. I mainly work now online, and I think you work online. So now from a practical level, right? Like how to help moms find each other online in a world where at the same time social media brings them down. Like it
Yeah.
causes anxiety, it doesn't relax us, it gives us comparison, like how to find that balance in the online world when it comes to finding a community. I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. What's your experience in that?
Yeah. So I also, that was why I was crying earlier, by the way, is that I was reading somebody had auditioned for a yoga class and I just kind of missed being in person. I missed being at the front of the room. Missed like those loud vinyasa classes and like, you know, just I missed my 20s for a minute and it made me nostalgic. But now in my mid 40s and with two children, I much prefer the flexibility of being online. I much prefer the reach of it too. Like I get to talk to you, right? Like we wouldn't be able to be physically in a room together if it were not for the internet. So that's been my motivation to bring things more online. I'm a teacher. It's just, I've always been a teacher. I will always be a teacher. And if I can bring that through courses or workshops or these online offerings, then that's like a gift. For moms out there that are looking, like that's my motivation to be in this space. But there are a lot of us out there that are doing this. There's a lot of moms out there that are hungry for community, that are incredible teachers in whatever their field may have been. Maybe it's meditation and yoga. Many people are coming at it from completely different aspects. You know, there's the whole community of the reconnected. I don't know if you follow Eleanor and Emma, where they come at it from a play therapy and a breath work, Kundalini breath work teacher. Emma is the breathwork and Kundalini teacher, and then Eleanor is breathwork and play therapy. And they've built this community of parents where it's all conscious parenting. They have their own app, they have their own different programs that you can join into. I really do think that there's safety in the online space because it's not just scrolling Instagram to try to find your connections. And that is one of my goals is in, and I don't know what I'm calling it yet. I'll just be totally honest to your listeners. Like, who knows? Like, I was calling it Let's Get Real Moms. Like, I don't know, and please feel free to like DM me and give me your ideas. But my vision, when the kids are a little bit older and I have the space and time, I want to create that safe hub too. I want to create, whether it's on some sort of messaging app or it's its own app, but that's my vision, is that the women that take my courses or take my workshops, that we're then all put into this pool together. And yes, it's through the internet, and maybe, yes, we are leveraging things like Facebook, but that ultimately we are going on there to connect with one another. And it's like-minded people, because I'm in Facebook groups for things like when I was breastfeeding, and it was life-saving for me. I was in Facebook groups for my business coaching, and the support in there is unparalleled. So I think there are ways to do it consciously, and I'm not scrolling to go in there.
Yeah.
So my advice, would be like, I'm still building mine, but you're welcome, like, to come join me. But it's to find people that you relate to and see if they've created containers, whether that's their own app or they have Facebook groups. Like, that's where you can join in. I remember being on like postpartummoms.net in the middle of the night in 2019. Like, this was well before people were kind of gathering online in the same way. I think moms know that, like, we need to reach out to each other, but we're all kind of stuck in our physical space. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there, but I know it does require some digging. It requires trying to find, finding your right people. But I like, they are out there, conscious parenting circles and conscious motherhood or mindful motherhood, or, whatever. Even like I'm now very much studying. I've done this deep dive into the pelvic floor, and like, I'm in a pelvic floor Facebook forum. It's not just moms, but it's women and pelvic floor focus. Like, that is a lifeline for me. So you can be intentional about how you're finding your community, and you really can build an incredible network online.
No, that's great advice, because sometimes we forget and we point moms to just, go and find your people, go and find your people. And you're like, but what people and where? And like you said, I actually, for me, I've joined a few WhatsApp groups and Facebook groups just for twins, breastfeeding for twins, surviving you with, and that has been just incredible, because it was a game changer for me. And I don't know all these people in the group, but I hadn't made that distinction between, general Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, whatever, Googling a question and just putting it out there in the internet versus going to that specific group.
Yeah.
And that is a game changer. And I realized that. And the Instagram scroll was really affecting me. It was really getting to me. It was making me anxious. It was making me tired. It was just drawing so much energy. So I've put a limit to my Instagram of 30 minutes. And as a mom, I was just finding myself comparing, as a mom, as a yoga teacher, in both ways. I was comparing myself to other moms and other yoga teachers. And then I set up my own private community as well. And we're 7 people, which is fine. And I love
That's
it.
wonderful.
And it's a private community. And I think that's the way to go.
Yep.
Absolutely. And we can support each other. But please let us know when you have your community, and I will share it.
Yeah. I mean, so there is like the Let's Get Real Moms on Facebook that people join in when they do my courses and stuff, but I'm still trying to build it out too. And we should share resources. And maybe that's another thing, is like, maybe, this is just brainstorming, like business women to business women, mom business owners to mom business owners, but maybe there should be like sharing of each other's resources, and like I am also friends with this person, and here's like another group. And I really do think that when women get together, there is a power. And when it's moms and we're now in that mother phase, like it's magic. We are creating life. And you may not have carried your own child. That doesn't matter. You're raising a child, right? Like you are supporting life and you bring a bunch of women together. It's like literal magic, right? So there's something about the communing and the gathering and however you want to do it. Some people prefer in person. I think the online space has a lot of opportunity, but put a bunch of women together or, pregnant people together or parents together and just see the magic that's going to come out of that. It's remarkable.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks. I love that. I love the aspect that the community goes with the yoga. And like you said, it's all about relationships. And yoga is relationships, and then the community is part of it. But to finish, I was hoping it just came to me. Would you mind sharing about your second birth story? Because you told us about the first, and I'm curious about the second. And on this podcast, we talk a lot about birth stories. So I think it'd be nice to finish with that story, if that's okay with you.
It actually was pretty quick. It was pretty quick. So I can
And
get
I
it
mean,
done in
how
2 minutes.
different, like how also you felt compared to the first one from this controlling
It was
aspect. That's what I'm
so
curious about.
healing. Yeah, yeah. I mean, first of all, he came when he wanted to come because he is an Aries baby. It's about to be his birthday next week, and he just does what he wants to do. So I think I was 37 weeks. It's so funny. I don't even know. With your second, I didn't write down
Yeah.
the birth weight. It's somewhere, but I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even
You
remember.
even forget you're
But
pregnant sometimes, don't you? I forgot
well,
all
no, I
about
definitely did
when the
pregnant because I
nausea.
was so sick.
Yes,
Yeah,
the
so
sick,
sick.
but
Thank God I didn't forget I was pregnant. Not thank God, but like maybe I wish
yeah.
I'd forgotten I was pregnant at times. But yeah, I know he came a couple weeks early. I did have a similar thing where I was starting to go into labor and we did get sent away from the hospital. But then we went back, and this time I was like, I'm going to give up control and I'm going to get the epidural and I'm just going to like, just whatever you need to do. So the epidural did not work. They gave it to me twice
Oh,
and it
really?
did not work. And I remember this was very empowering. When you have an epidural, they're going to tell you have to stay on your back because you can't support your legs, obviously. But I had movement in my legs. I had movement in my entire body, and I was fighting back with them. So first of all, I also was like, get the catheter out of me. The catheter was so uncomfortable. And I'm like, you don't understand. I have full sensation. Like, get the catheter out of me. I was like yelling at everybody what to do. I'm like, I need to be sitting. I need to have my knees up. So they put me in this like throne position, they called it. And like almost because I was most comfortable on the toilet. And they're like, okay, well, let's get her into the throne position. And then I was like, I have to stand up. And they're like, no, you can't stand up. But I remember a friend told me a birth story. She had tried for a water birth and was transferred into the hospital. And similarly, she didn't have the epidural, but they were saying to her, you need to be on your back. And she said, no, my body is telling me I need to stand up. And I had that in the back of my mind. I didn't have a doula this time. It was literally me yelling at everybody, like advocating for myself. Even my husband was like, you can settle down. Like, no, do not, everybody out of my way. It was really, I like had her with me. I had that power of like, no, trust my body. And I'm feeling everything in my body in a very different way. The other thing was that with my first, I would have the contractions and it all was just noise. It was just like, yes, I was timing them, but I couldn't feel the wave of it. With this one, I could really feel the wave. I could feel the beginning. I could feel it cresting. I knew when it was like my uterus is like
Yeah.
pulsing. We say that, but I also knew that it was going to come off on the other end. So I advocated to get myself to stand up. And then I was like, I need to turn around. So I ended up turning on the bed so that like the bed was like in a seated position. And I was facing the back of the chair, if you will, on my knees. And I was like moving my knees up and down and turning my head. My husband said it looked like I was riding Soul Cycle, but that's what I was doing. And I was screaming, and my doctor was trying to shush me, and I was telling her to fuck off because I was letting my body do what it needed to do. And it ended up being, they finally somehow convinced me to lay on my back for that last minute of getting him out, which is fine. But it was so fast. And then he was just out and he was on me. And then I yelled at a couple more people. And then everybody left the room. And it was just me, my husband, and this baby. My first son was taken away from me too. That was the other
Mm.
part, because he was whisked to the NICU
Mm.
with breathing stuff. So it was like, it was such a beautiful redo. And then we're like left with him and we're like, let's go. Like, we don't want to be here. Let's go. But we ended up actually leaving the hospital in less than 24 hours. And it just felt, I was so empowered by that birth. And I'm not saying like, I would still try to, I don't even know about, epidural or not, whatever. You do the birth of your choosing. But what was empowering about it is like, I really was listening to my body and I was letting my body lead, even against the, quote unquote, medical advice of nurses and doctors. And it was amazing. And one of the nurses came up to me the day after, because I was like on the phone calling Jonah, my little guy who was here, who was then suddenly not so little, and like doing FaceTime. And she's like, you were remarkable, because I just got really calm and in my body. Yeah. I mean, I think that was part of it. Was like, when on my first birth, I was fighting against my natural everything, right? I was fighting against my body's changes. I was fighting against the needs. I was fighting against sensations. I was fighting against what was coming up for me. And with the second, I was so tired that I was just like, okay. And like, but I surrendered to my body, and it ended up being this really beautiful and healing birth. So
How
very
beautiful.
grateful.
And yeah, how beautiful. I love hearing birth stories, and I love the fact that in your birth, a birth story came to you.
Yes. Yeah.
Birth
Sure. My
stories, and
friend.
that's the power of
Yes.
community, and that's how women support each
Yes.
other, and that's how we lift each other up, because if we share these things, and
Yes.
you had two epidurals and they didn't work, and the people are telling you no, but you can't stand up, and you're like, but I can stand up. And someone else might hear this and they might have had an epidural and thought they were crazy because they thought something was wrong, but actually it's just so important to hear these stories. And yeah, and I teach hypnobirthing, and the main thing is really like
Mm.
listen to your body. Do not argue with a woman in labor,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
she knows what's going on, and it's not even she's not even conscious of what's going on. It makes me angry as well to think, like, why should you have to keep telling people, like, why do you have to fight for this, right?
Also, like, why are you shushing me? Like, are you
Yeah,
kidding me right now?
exactly. Why, if
Like,
you're telling someone I don't feel I want to stand up, then stand
no,
up. That
no. And then to like have, even my husband's like, maybe we'd like, no, everybody out of my way.
yeah,
Just leave the room. I've got this. That's what I felt like, that's what it really felt like. With the first, I was just so terrified, but I really was like, everybody get out and I will take care of this. I will
yeah,
call you when I need you. I mean, I'm glad I did it in a hospital setting. Right shortly after I had him, I was like, okay, we're going to have a third and I'm going to have a water birth at home. We're going to do this again. But like, no, that ship has sailed. Husband's gotten the
it's
vasectomy.
done.
Like,
Yeah,
we're
yeah, yeah.
not doing that again. And it's taken a couple of years, but I feel like, okay, no, that was my redo.
But at least that's the
And
feeling it left
yeah,
you with. The feeling of being
yes.
able to do it again means that it's a good
Yes, that
feeling.
I was like, all right, let's do this,
Yeah.
which now I'm like, oh my God, no. Not, no, thank you. I'm good. I'm good with my 3 and 5-year-old. Like, they're exhausting enough as it is. But
Yeah.
yeah, I just trusting in your body and really not being afraid of what you're feeling, but also for people when it's your first time or you're somebody that's always been gripping in your life, people are telling you, oh, listen to your body and ride the waves. You may not be able to differentiate them. I literally could not differentiate the crest and the fall of the contraction with my first. It was just all painful and scary and overwhelming. So I think that's why services like what you provide and doing the deeper work, of the slowed down, the yoga nidra and the listening is helpful, but also just being kind to ourselves. Some people will do inner child meditations with like their 6-year-old self. I like to bring in like my pregnant selves, in those different forms, or birthing Sarah with my first child because she was just so scared, it just didn't know what was going on. And I had to let go of control in a way I'd never had before. And now you have young children, you're just like, blah.
No, but it's so
Wow.
beautiful. Each pregnancy teaches you something about yourself
Mm.
that you had no idea about. And even the next one teaches you something else. So I think that's just such a beautiful thing about even not just pregnancy, just becoming a mother, however you bring your child into the world, or however you take care of a child, it teaches you so much. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Thank you for
It's,
having me. And I'm so excited to watch your community grow and grow, and to meet the people in your community. They can reach out to me anytime as
yeah.
well.